Good evening and welcome to tonight's session about lazy literature. So this is a bibliotherapy session live, my monthly event, Damien Barr's Literary Salon. I'm just checking that all my connections are working. I've literally just flown back from the USA and it's great to have you joining me tonight. Some of you might notice that I'm not in my usual spot where I have my study. Where I am tonight, I'm going to have to be peering in to you to see your comments because I thought it was appropriate to do tonight's session on lazy literature from a hammock. And I hope that some of you are having suitably relaxing summers where you can actually read some fabulous books, fiction and non-fiction. I'd love to know what those books are. If you're having time to read, do send me your own favourite lazy literature if you can. So when I say lazy literature, I don't mean literature that's written in a lazy fashion. I mean books that are written to celebrate what it is to be lazy one way or another. And I've got a whole host of fantastic books to discuss this evening, including Tom Hodgkinson's How to Be Idle, which I'm sure that many of you fans of the Idler magazine and the Idler Festival will know about. The Idler Festival was on only a couple of weeks ago and had a lot of really fantastic speakers, including Jarvis Cocker and many others. And Tom Hodgkinson has been a keen proponent of the idle lifestyle for many years. In fact, ever since he left university, I believe he has managed to live an idle life while writing quite a lot of very helpful and inspiring books at the same time. So it's great to have lots of people coming along, and I am going to have to keep leaping up and down from my hammock to say hello to people that are here. Great to see you, Fluey actually, and Scrack Badge, and many more coming in on Facebook too. So I would like to start up, I hope appropriately, by talking about our cure for inability to get out of bed in the novel Cure. Because I looked up laziness in the novel Cure, and we don't actually have a cure for laziness. Obviously, because we, when we wrote the book, didn't believe that it needed a cure. Me and Susan Elderkin, who wrote the book together, are great fans of the idle lifestyle if you can manage to attain it, which obviously takes quite a lot of hard work to achieve. Anyway, I'm going to read you our cure for inability to get out of bed. And the cure is a book called Bed by David Whitehouse. Perhaps you have a headache or a hangover. Perhaps you hate your job and have declared a duvet day, in which case see PMT for our list of the 10 best novels for duvet days, which you'll find in here. Perhaps your central heating is on the blink and you can't get warm. Perhaps everything seems pointless, see pointlessness. Or you're depressed, see depression general. Whatever the reason, if you know that sometimes staying in bed seems a much better idea than emerging into your day, keep this volume under your pillow so you don't have far to stretch. Read it once, and then during subsequent attacks of this condition, you'll need only a brief dip to send you leaping out from under your duvet and thence into anything other than the small suburban bedroom and freak show of a life depicted within its pages. Malcolm Eade has stayed in bed for so long that his skin is as white as an institution. He's deprived of sunlight and drained of life. Weighing in at 102 stone, an umbrella of fat pins him to his bed. After deciding for complex reasons on his 26th birthday to simply never get out of bed again, he's been there ever since. Cared for and fed by his hopelessly devoted mother, his dreamy dad and his broken brother, he is on the planet around which they orbit. He is the planet around which they orbit. A great big hot air balloon of a planet. Malcolm escapes his carapace of flesh in the end. But unless you want to be living in your parents' bedroom aged 43, unless you want blisters and sores on parts of your body that you can't even see, unless you fancy being unable to even meet your hands together to pray for escape, read this and then get up out of bed right now. So that was our cure for being unable to get out of bed when we wrote the novel Cure back in 2013. But tonight I'm actually going to be talking about books that sing the praises of lazing around, whether it's actually staying in bed or lazing around on the hot, lazy, hazy days of summer. And I would love to hear your thoughts about what books you like to read that make you enjoy those lazy, hazy days of summer and give you perhaps a substitute for them if you're not able to enjoy them literally yourself. So I'm here tonight in my cabin with my hammock because I wanted to depict the joys of lying around. And I hope that some of you are having a chance to lie around and read lots of books. If you are, send me a message and tell me what they are. I've had a few already and I'd love to know what yours are. There's a book that very much comes to mind as one of the first to discuss this evening, which is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Mosh Beg, which is a really fantastic novel, which I do love, and I must say that it's great both to read to yourself and to listen to on audio. It weaves together the few remaining threads of a nameless narrator's sanity into a story of privilege, grief, and pain. The narrator is a gorgeous woman living in New York City in the year 2000. She should have it all, but she rejects everything around her. She rejects her privileges, she rejects her wealth, she rejects her beauty, and she decides that she's going to embrace apathy. So she starts the story with a decision to quit her job at a hit art gallery to focus on her favourite hobby, which is sleeping. Her goal is to spend the better part of the year to come sleeping and getting the rest that she feels will reset her. And with the assistance of her completely mad psychiatrist, Dr. Tuttle, the narrator mixes medications to achieve her blissful unconsciousness. Her routine develops into days of sleep, mixed with the occasional walk from her trust fund apartment to her local bodega for 2 coffees and junk food. Do I say bodega or bodega? Sorry, don't know the answer to that. The narrator is plagued by her best friend Reva, who is an image-obsessed, effective user of passive aggression in the most irritating ways, and this weaves through the novel. It's actually a very funny book, and although it is all about lying around and doing nothing and basically sleeping, it's a book that has a lot of pace and drama. It's very beautifully written, it's very funny and pithy and dark, and I'll just read you a little bit to give you a little hint of the style of writing. Whenever I woke up, night or day, I'd shuffle through the bright marble foyer of my building and go up the block and around the corner, where there was a bodega that never closed. I'd get 2 large coffees with cream and 6 sugars each, chug the first one in the elevator on the way back up to my apartment, then sip the second one slowly while I watched movies and ate animal crackers and took trazodone and Ambien and Nembutal until I fell asleep again. I lost track of time in this way. Days passed, weeks, a few months went by. When I thought of it, I ordered delivery from the Thai restaurant across the street or a tuna salad platter from the diner on First Avenue. I'd wake up to find voice messages on my cell phone from salons or spas confirming appointments I'd booked in my sleep. I always called back to cancel, which I hated doing because I hated talking to people. Early on in this phase, I had my dirty laundry picked up and clean laundry delivered once a week. It was a comfort to me to hear the torn plastic bags rustle in the draft from the living room windows. I liked catching whiffs of the fresh laundry smell while I dozed on the sofa. But after a while, it was too much trouble to gather up all the dirty clothes and stuff them in the laundry bag. And the sound of my own washer and dryer interfered with my sleep. So I just threw away my dirty underpants. All the old pairs reminded me of Trevor anyway. For a while, tacky lingerie from Victoria's Secret kept showing up in the mail. Frilly fuchsia and lime green thongs and teddies and baby doll nightgowns, each sealed in a clear plastic baggie. I stuffed the little baggies into the closet and went commando. An occasional package from Barney's or Saks provided me with men's pyjamas and other things I couldn't remember ordering. Cashmere socks, graphic t-shirts, designer jeans. I took a shower once a week at most. I stopped tweezing, stopped bleaching, stopped waxing, stopped brushing my hair. No moisturising or exfoliating. No shaving. And so on. So that is my year of rest and relaxation, which is a great book about the art of lying around and doing nothing. And it's great to see lots of you joining me this evening. Do any of you have favourite lazy literature reads that you'd like to share with me? I've had a few people commenting about The Idler's Companion, which is an excellent book all about lazing around. Also, How to Be Idle by Tom Hodgkinson, of a similar ilk. And many of the books that I'm going to be talking about this evening are about being in bed. And this is not necessarily a bad thing in these books. And one of the most interesting ones, which is frequently cited as a model of literature about the art of doing nothing, is A Man Asleep by Georges Perec. So, just try not to fall out of this hammock, which could be amusing, could be interesting, trying to keep a grip on staying visible to you and at the same time in the hammock without also completely exposing my incredibly white legs. Anyway, here we go. A Man Asleep by Georges Perec. Perec is most well known for his book Life User's Manual, which, by the by, we have in the novel Cure as a cure for pointlessness, because Life User's Manual is a book in a way all about pointlessness, but it's about finding meaning in a pointless world. And it is an absolutely brilliant read, thoroughly entertaining and witty and funny. And A Man Asleep is one of Perec's earliest novels, which he wrote in 1967 in the second person, which is quite peculiar as an experience to read. There aren't that many books in the world written in the second person. I can only think of a few. Do let me know if you think of others. One is Tom Robbins' Half Asleep in Full Pyjamas. One is Michelle Faber's The Crimson Petal and the White. One is A Man Asleep by Georges Perec. I know there'll be lots of others, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about any of them. But reading this book in the second person is quite an unsettling experience, because it does make you feel as if, of course, you are the person who is experiencing life asleep. And this book is all about a man who essentially gives up on life and decides to lie down and do nothing. And he slowly negates everything in his life. He stops hanging out with any of his friends. He stops enjoying food deliberately. He makes himself only eat incredibly bland food because he doesn't want any kind of stimulation. He also stops leaving his bedsit. He's only 25, he's a student, and he has an allowance, so he's able to make his 15 francs a day in the 1960s go quite a long way. But all he does is buy a couple of meals, smoke gauloises religiously, wash his 6 pairs of socks throughout the week, letting them soak in a bowl of water, which is all quite unpleasant. And he essentially just thinks all the time. It is, I must admit, quite a depressing read, but it is also fascinating as an exploration of doing literally nothing. And I'll read you a little section of it to give you a feeling of the experience of reading the book. This is A Man Asleep by Georges Perec. You are sitting naked from the waist up, wearing only pyjama bottoms, in your garret on the narrow bench that serves as your bed with a book, Raymond Aron's 18 Lectures on Industrial Society, resting on your knees, open at page 112. At first it's just a sort of lassitude or tiredness, as if you suddenly became aware that for a long time, for several hours, you've been succumbing to an insidious, numbing discomfort, not exactly painful, but nonetheless intolerable, succumbing to the sickly sweet and stifling sensation of being without muscles or bones, of being a sack of potatoes surrounded by other sacks of potatoes. The sun beats down on the zinc flashings on the roof. In front of you at eye level on a whitewood shelf, there is a half-empty, rather grubby bowl of Nescafe, an almost empty bag of sugar, a cigarette burning down in a whitish mock opaline ashtray, bearing an advertiser's logo. Someone is moving around in the next room, coughing, dragging his feet, moving furniture, opening drawers. Drops of water are continually forming on the drinking water tap on the landing. Noises drift up from Rue Saint-Honoré, far below. The bells of Saint Roch chime too. You look up, you stop reading, but you'd already stopped long ago. You put the open book down beside you on the bed. You reach out your hand, you stub out the cigarette, which is smoking in the ashtray. You finish your bowl of Nescafe. It's barely lukewarm, too sweet on the bitter side. You're soaked in sweat. You get up, you go over to the window and close it. You turn on the tap in the tiny wash basin. You pass a damp flannel over your forehead, the back of your neck, your shoulders. You curl up sideways on a narrow bench. You close your eyes. Your head is heavy. Your legs are numb. And so it goes on. Our narrator, well, he's talking to us, you, does absolutely nothing. He does less and less as the days go on. Nonetheless, it is a riveting read. It's difficult to explain why it is a riveting read, but like with Ottessa Moshfeg's My Year of Rest and Relaxation, it's a book where almost nothing happens, but you are riveted by the thought processes of the narrator in each case. And just read you a tiny bit more, because it's very much a philosophical diatribe, rather much on the lines of an Albert Camus kind of vibe. Now you learn how to last. At times you are the master of time itself, the master of the world, a watchful little spider at the hub of your web, reigning over Paris. You command the north by Avenue de l'Opera, the south by the Louvre Colonnade, the east and west by Rue Saint-Honoré. At times you attempt to solve the puzzle of a face which emerges, perhaps from the complex play of shadows and blisters in a portion of the ceiling. Eyes and nose and mouth, the forehead uninterrupted by any hairline, or else it is the precise outline of the helix of an ear, the beginnings of a shoulder and a neck. There are 1,000 ways to kill time, and no two are the same. But each is as good as the next. 1,000 ways of waiting for nothing. 1,000 games that you can invent and then drop straight away. You have everything still to learn, everything that cannot be learnt. Solitude, indifference, patience, silence. You must become unused to everything. You must lose the habit of going to meet those with whom you rub shoulders for so long, of taking your meals and your cups of coffee every day at the place that others have kept, sometimes defended for you, of languishing in the insipid complicity of friendships that linger on but just won't die, in the opportunist and cowardly rancour of affairs that are coming apart at the seams. This book, A Man Asleep by Georges Perec, is about a man slowly shutting down. It really is about depression in reality, and Georges Perec was someone who did experience depression in his 20s, and he admitted that this was a very autobiographical kind of novel. It's very reminiscent of another book by Paul Sayer called The Comforts of Madness, which is a book that won the Whitbread Prize in 1982. And that's all about a boy who becomes a man who completely gives up on moving. In A Man Asleep, the hero, the protagonist, you, does actually continue living. He does get his own food, he walks around, he wanders, and he does things even though they are very limited. In The Comforts of Madness, the hero does pretty much absolutely nothing. He becomes catatonic and he ends up having to be fed. He ends up in hospital, and some of the nurses that look after him believe that he is faking it and that he's not really catatonic at all. He's a voluntary catatonic, but others think that it's a medical condition. And we know, because we're inside his head, that it is in fact a voluntary situation because he was abused as a child and had a really terrible life, and he decided to just shut down and stop moving. And that, frankly, is a remarkably depressing book as well, but equally fascinating. And George Perec's A Man Asleep is a companion book to another one in the same volume, which is called Things, A Story of the 60s, which is a book which had an amazingly big effect on people in the 60s and was a huge cult, massive book, particularly in France and Europe, but wasn't translated into English until very recently. So we English didn't really know about it until now. And Things, A Story of the 60s, is all about a couple who collect things, and they are obsessed with material wealth and the power of advertising. It is set in the 60s. And it's in a way the other side of the coin to the book, A Man Asleep. They're both novellas, they're both quite short. And anyone that likes George Perec, if you've read Life the User's Manual, should definitely read these. And if you haven't read any Perec, also read them, because they're both fascinating little novellas and very much about the idea of why do we actually do anything? What is the purpose of work? Which is a question that Tom Hodgkinson asks in this book too, How to Be Idle. In this book, getting more and more relaxed as we speak, there are, I think, 24 chapters, which are about the 24 hours of the day, but also about all the ways that you can be idle throughout that day and how you can perhaps divide your day so that you don't get completely dominated by work. And I'll be coming more onto thoughts from the idler shortly. Another book which I think is a fascinating one in terms of thinking about lazy literature and doing nothing is A Manual for Cleaning Women by Lucia Berlin, which is a collection of short stories which you have not yet discovered. You certainly must. Lucia Berlin was an amazing writer. She seemed to fit many lives into her 68 years. Brought up in the remote mining camps of Alaska and the Midwest, she was an abused and lonely child in wartime Texas, a rich and privileged young woman in Santiago, a bohemian loft-living hipster in 50s New York, and an ER nurse in 70s inner city Oakland. By the age of 32, she'd been married 3 times, had 4 sons, and was battling a chronic alcohol addiction. My eventful life provides the subject matter for these stories. So these stories are very much autobiographical, but she also did embroider them to make them more interesting, which she freely admitted, and she turns them into fiction. In the story So Long, for instance, a marriage to a heroin addict is described as encompassing both times of intense technicolor happiness and times that were sordid and frightening. And that goes some way to capturing the emotional range of this collection. Loneliness and shame creep through stories set in hospitals, detox clinics, old people's homes and prisons. And many of the stories are set in the rather bleak territory of women who have very little money in the 1960s. However, Berlin's writing is characterised by an enormous appetite for life, humour and love. For instance, in Tiger Bites, a story detailing the horrors of a backstreet abortion clinic in Mexico, it's the warmth and the wicked fun of the relationship between the narrator and her glamorous cousin that come to the fore. And Tiger Bites is one of the ones that I would totally recommend you should read if you haven't read any. That's one I would maybe start with. And I'm going to read you a little bit of it because I just love the way Lucia Berlin writes. She is very funny and she manages to capture so much in just a few short paragraphs. And each of these stories is not that long, but you get amazing glimpses of a whole life or several lives in each story. So I'm going to read you a bit from Tiger Bites, which is about a backstreet abortion, and actually it's particularly interesting in the light of current events in the USA relating to abortion laws. After Bella had filled me in on the reunion situation, she told me about Cletus, her husband of only 2 months. Her folks had been as mad when she got married as mine had been with me. Cletus was a construction worker, rodeo rider, roughneck. Tears rolled down Bella's lovely cheeks as she told me what happened. Lou, we were happy as clams. I swear nobody ever had such a sweet, tender love. Why in heaven's name are clams happy? We had a dear little trailer in the South Valley by the river. Our little blue heaven. I cleaned house and washed dishes. I cooked, made pineapple upside down cake and macaroni. All kinds of things, and he was proud of me, and me of him. First bad thing that happened was Daddy forgave me for marrying him, and he bought us a house on Rim Road. You know, a mansion, columns on the porch. But we didn't want his house, so Cletus and Daddy had an awful fight. I tried to explain to Daddy we didn't need his house, his old house. How I'd be happy living with Cletus on the back of a flatbed truck. And I had to explain it over and over to Cletus too, because even though I refused to move, he took to sulking. Then one day I went to Popular Dry Goods and bought some clothes and towels. Just a few things on my old charge account I've had my entire life long. Cletus had a fit, said I spent more money in 2 hours than he made in 6 months. So I just took it all outside and poured kerosene on it, set fire to everything, and we kissed and made up. Oh, little Lou, I love him so bad. Next darn fool thing I did, and why I did it I'll never know. Mama had come to call. I guess I was just feeling like a married lady, you know. I'd grown up. I made coffee and served Oreos on a little dish. Blabbed my big mouth about sex. I suppose I felt I was big enough to talk to her now about sex. Oh God, well, and I didn't know either, so I asked her if I could get pregnant if I swallowed Cletus's gum. She tore out of the trailer and ran home to Daddy. All hell broke loose. That night, Daddy and Rex came and beat the living daylights out of Cletus. Put him in the hospital with a broken collarbone and 2 broken ribs. Talking about he was a pervert and putting him to jail for sodomy and annulling the marriage. Can you imagine going down on your own lawful wedded husband is against the law? Anyways, I wouldn't go home with Daddy and just stayed at Cletus's bedside until I could bring him home. We were fine, happy as those old clams again. And he couldn't go back to work for a while. He took to drinking a lot. Then last week I took a look out and see this brand new Cadillac on our driveway with a huge stuffed Santa sitting in it and satin ribbons all around it. I laughed, you know, because it was funny, but Peter said, happy, huh? Well, I ain't never going to make you happy like your precious Daddy does. And he left. No, that's just a little glimpse from the story Tiger Bites by Lucia Berlin, which is a part of the collection which are all masterpieces, I would say, of lazy literature. In that, it's not lazy writing at all, quite the opposite. The writing is taut and brilliant. But there's stories about, in a way, laziness. I mean, they're not all. Some of them are about working very hard. But then stories in which very little happens, but there's huge amounts of drama going on. under the surface. So moving on from there, I'm just going to see if you can all hear me, by the way. Do send in messages if anyone is experiencing bad sound quality. Great to see you, Bill and Jenny, and Lauren. Bodega. Thank you. Sorry, I kept getting that wrong. That's quite annoying. Bodega. And hi, Rejuvenation Lounge, and many others on Instagram. Great to see you all. So, to continue on the theme of laziness in literature, just been talking about the amazing Lucia Berlin, and we would now like to move on to the previously mentioned Idler's Companion, which is a compendium of idle literature created by Tom Hodgkinson and Matthew de Abatua, who Tom, many of you know, is the creator of the Idler magazine, and many of you might have gone to the Idler Festival last weekend, or very recently anyway, which I was also joyously lucky to be at too, doing some bibliotherapy sessions where I met lots of lovely people. And if any of you are here tonight, hello, great to see you again. So, in this book, The Idler's Companion, we have lots of lovely short sections of great writing with many authors from Ivan Gonkarov, who wrote Oblomov, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, Jerome K. Jerome, Will Self, Pascal, Henry David Thoreau, and many more. All of whom are people that wrote about idleness one way or another. And when I say idleness, I'm meaning it in the same way as being lazy. I don't mean it pejoratively, because I do think that much greater art comes out of doing nothing. We need time to daydream and to float around and enjoy long, hot, lazy summer days when we're lounging around on lawns. And I hope that some of you are having a chance to do that this summer. Oblomov by Ivan Gonkarov was written in 1859, and it's a masterful portrait of upper-class decline, which made Ivan Gonkarov famous throughout Russia on its publication. Ilya Ilyich Oblomov is a member of Russia's dying aristocracy in this story. A man so lazy that he's given up his job in the civil service, neglected his books, insulted his friends, and found himself in debt. Too apathetic to do anything about it. He lives in a grubby, crumbling apartment, and there he's waited on by Zakhar, his equally idle servant who does practically nothing too. Terrified by the activity necessary to participate in the real world, Oblomov manages to avoid work, postpones change, and finally risks losing the love of his life, which is which reminds me of another book where procrastination leads to losing the love of your life, which is Remains of the Day by Ishiguro. A very different kind of book, but one also which is about not doing things when you ought to. So I'm going to read you a little bit from Oblomov, written by Ivan Gonkarov. The dressing gown had a number of invaluable qualities in Oblomov's eyes. It was soft and pliable. It did not get in his way. It obeyed the least movement of his body, like a docile slave. Oblomov never wore a tie or waistcoat at home, because he liked comfort and freedom. He wore long, soft, wide slippers. When he got up from bed, he put his feet straight into them without looking. Lying down was not for Ilyich either a necessity, as it is for a sick or sleepy man, or an occasional need, as it is for a person who is tired, or a pleasure, as it is for a sluggard. It was his normal state. When he was at home, and he was almost always at home, he was lying down, and invariably in the same room, the one in which we have found him and which served him as bedroom, study, and reception room. He had 3 more rooms, but he seldom looked into them, only perhaps in the morning, when his servant swept his study, which did not happen every day. In those other rooms, the furniture was covered and the curtains were drawn. So that's Oblomov, which is a fantastic book all about being incredibly lazy. And Oblomov is a strangely sympathetic character, like most of the characters that I'll be talking about this evening. I think the only one that we perhaps find difficult to understand of the ones I've mentioned is Paul Sayers' The Comforts of Madness, but we do actually sympathise with him, even though it is a very shocking and depressing tale that he's telling in that book. I'm now going to read you a little bit on being idle by Jerome K. Jerome, written in 1889, and this is also from this delightful compendium, The Idler's Companion, which is an anthology of lazy literature. Now, this is a subject on which I flatter myself I really am au fait. The gentleman who, when I was young, bathed me at Wisdom's Font for 9 guineas a term, no extras, used to say he never knew a boy who could do less work in more time. And I remember my poor grandmother once incidentally observing in the course of an instruction upon the use of the prayer book that it was highly improbable that I should ever do much that I ought to do, but that as she felt convinced beyond a doubt that I should leave undone pretty well everything that I ought to do. I'm afraid I have somewhat belied half the dear old lady's prophecy. Heaven help me! I've done a good many things that I ought not to have done in spite of my laziness, but I have fully confirmed the accuracy of her judgment so far as neglecting much that I ought not to have neglected is concerned. Idling always has been my strong point. I take no credit to myself in the matter. It is a gift. Few possess it. There are plenty of lazy people and plenty of slow coaches, but a genuine idler is a rarity. He is not a man who slouches about with his hands in his pockets. On the contrary, his most startling characteristic is that he is always intensely busy. There's a paradox for you. Would any of you describe yourself as idlers? And if so, I wonder what picture comes to mind. It is impossible to enjoy idling thoroughly unless one has plenty of work to do. There's no fun in doing nothing when you have nothing to do. Wasting time is merely an occupation then, and a most exhausting one. Idleness, like kisses, to be sweet, must be stolen. Many years ago, when I was a young man, I was taken very ill. I never could see myself that much was the matter with me, except that I had a beastly cold. But I suppose it was something very serious, for the doctor said that I ought to have come to him a month before, and that if it, whatever it was, had gone on for another week, he would not have answered for the consequences. It is an extraordinary thing, but I never knew a doctor called into any case yet, for what it transpired that another day's delay would have rendered the cure hopeless. Our medical guide, philosopher and friend, is like the hero in a melodrama. He always comes upon the scene just and only just in the nick of time. It's Providence, that's what it is. Well, as I was saying, I was very ill, and was ordered to Buxton for a month, with strict injunctions to do nothing whatever all the while that I was there. Rest is what you require, said the doctor. Perfect rest. I won't go on because I'm realising that I have much to cover, and time is going very fast, surprisingly, considering the subject matter, which is a languorous and lazy one. A few people, by the way, have mentioned lazy literature to me that they have loved, and quite a lot of these suggestions have been books such as The Go-Between by L.P. Hartley, which is all about a very, very long, intensely hot summer. And I agree, that is a great book thinking about lazy literature, because it's all about a boy, Leo, age 12, enjoying to some degree a summer where he has very little to do, and then he gets involved in a rather intense love affair. People that don't know the book must immediately rush off and read it. Other fantastic books which involve lazy literature or make you think of lazy hot summers could be Rumer Godden's wonderful book, The Green Gage Summer, which is a gorgeous coming-of-age novel in which four children go off to France and they spend a whole summer eating greengages and beginning to discover the adult world. And I'll just read you the very first sentence because it always is amazingly evocative to me. On and off, all that hot French August, we made ourselves ill from eating the greengages. Joss and I felt guilty. We were still at the age when we thought being greedy was a childish fault, and this gave our guilt a tinge of hopelessness, because up to then we had believed that as we grew older, our thoughts would disappear, and none of them did. That is a great first sentence, and if you've read the book, it immediately takes you straight to that hot French summer of eating greengages and letting the juice dribble down your chin and having a sense of recklessness in a way, because the kids in the book are unmoored because their mother is taken ill and she can't look after them, and they therefore have to fend for themselves, and things get interesting then. So many books to talk about, but another one that I'm going to mention now, just thinking about the Rumer Godden book, just getting comfy on my hammock again so that I can recline and talk to you. It comes to mind, perhaps because of the title, The Great Godden by Meg Rosoff, which is a really fabulous coming-of-age novel again, which is all about a long, hot summer on the coast of Suffolk. And one thing that I didn't realise about it when I read it, which I can't quite believe I hadn't realised, was that the main character, the narrator, it's unclear whether they are male or female. We don't know if they're a boy or a girl, which I, to my shame, excuse me while I readjust myself, had not actually noticed, and it was my daughter Harper who read the book and pointed out to me that she didn't know the sex of the protagonist. And I did then realise, I then researched and discovered that Meg Rosoff deliberately wrote the book with that intention, that we wouldn't know the sex of the narrator. And I projected onto the narrator that it was a girl. And actually I could just as easily have projected that it was a boy. And that in itself is an amazing feat of brilliant writing. And I really love this book because it all takes place over one long hot summer in Suffolk. And actually we do have a sense, maybe partly from the book cover, but also from the way it's written, that we're in some wonderful California beach vibe, but it is actually Suffolk, which is where Meg Rosoff actually lives. And the story's about a family that go to Suffolk every year to enjoy their summer house, which they've had for at least 2 previous generations, I think. And they always just go there and hang around, lime around, as they like to say in Trinidad. The S54 books are always talking about liming around, and many other Caribbean novels as well. Earl Lovelace, for instance. So there they are liming around in Suffolk. And this year, 2 boys come to stay with them for the first time ever. They are the Goddens, irresistible, charming Kit and surly, silent Hugo. And they change everything about this summer in Suffolk. And I'm going to read you a little bit to just give you a sense of how great this book is. Every year, when school ends, we jam the car full of indispensable junk and head to the beach. By the time 6 people have crammed their bare essentials into the car, Dad says he can't see out the window, and there's no room for any of us, so half of everything is removed, but it doesn't seem to help. I always end up sitting on a tennis racket or a bag of shoes. By the time we set off, everyone's in a foul mood. The drive is a nightmare of shoving and arguing and mum shouting that if we don't all pipe down, she's going to have a breakdown. And once a year, Dad actually pulls over to the side of the road and says he'll just sit there till everyone shuts the fuck up. We've been coming to the beach since we were born on the theory that life existed even before that. Dad's been coming since he was a child, and Mum since she met Dad and gave birth to us four. The drive takes hours, but eventually we come off the motorway, and that's when the mood changes. The familiarity of the route does something to our brains, and we start to whine silently, like dogs approaching a park. It's half an hour precisely from the roundabout to the house, and we know every inch of landscape on the way. Bonus points are earned for deer or horses glimpsed from car windows, or an owl sitting on a fence post, or Harry the hare hopping down the road. Harry frequently appears in the middle of the road on the day we arrive, and then again on the day we leave. Incontrovertible proof that our world is a sophisticated computer simulation. So I love that beginning of the book because you have that sense of anticipation, the beginning of the holiday, an immediate sense of a big family swabbling around with their car full of junk, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with that kind of beginning of a holiday moment. And the summer projects in front of them. They have 6 weeks of freedom and having nothing to do. The person that is the narrator gets a little part-time job in a local shop, and then these 2 boys come along, and the oldest one is beautiful and irresistible, and the younger one is moody, dark and mysterious, and they completely shift everything about the whole summer. And it's a great book about lazy, hot summers, because that's exactly what's happening from the point of view of the kids. And I would thoroughly recommend it as an excellent, lazy, hot summer read, which takes you into your own idle youth. It does seem that many of these books are written about teenage life or youth or younger people, because it's the younger folk perhaps that manage to have the idle opportunities to enjoy their long hot summers without having to do anything. But in the instance of George Perec, it is an adult decision to have a completely idle life. Another book that in a way is an example of lazy literature or idle literature is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, which is an epic tome, very long, I think at least 800 pages, and it has a huge cast of characters, but it is a very funny novel, and it is dark, but it is also highly entertaining. It's all about addiction, it's all about an eponymous film, a film cartridge, which is the film Infinite Jest, which has the power, perhaps, to kill the people that watch it, which I know is not funny, but it is a darkly funny idea. There's all sorts of people in the book who've been hospitalised after their 4th suicide attempt in 3 years, unbearable pain of depression intersecting with marijuana addiction, various other addictions are going on. There's a narcotics addict who robs houses to finance his addiction. There's a man who accidentally kills another man by gagging him when he's ill with a cold and he can't breathe through his nose. There's lots of dark, awful, and darkly funny, amusing incidents. But Infinite Jest, you could say, is a perfect book to read when you are feeling lazy and wanting to have time, an infinite time to enjoy brilliant writing. And that's another aspect of lazy literature that people have written in to me to talk about. The idea that when you're lazing around, perhaps on a hammock, you want, of course, to be stimulated and to read something really gripping and brilliant. And Infinite Jest is a big fat tome. It is brilliant. Not necessarily gripping, but it is a book that if you allow your mind to flow into, then you will be swept along by its infinite ideas and its hilariousness. It is a book that people do laugh out loud and fall off their chairs on public transport. One of those books that people want to share and read out different sections of. So if you haven't dared to pick it up yet, give it a go. That's Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. I'll just read you a little section from it. It's of some interest that the lively arts of the millennial USA treat anhedonia and internal emptiness as hip and cool. It's maybe the vestiges of the romantic glorification of Weltschmerz, which means world weariness or hip ennui. Maybe it's the fact that most of the arts here are produced by world-weary and sophisticated older people, and then consumed by younger people, who not only consume art, but study it for clues on how to be cool, hip, and keep in mind that for kids and younger people, to be hip and cool is the same as to be admired and accepted and included, and so unalone. Forget so-called peer pressure. It's more like peer hunger. No, we enter a spiritual puberty where we snap to the fact that the great transcendent horror is loneliness, excluded engagement in the self. Once we've hit this age, we will now give or take anything, wear any mask to fit, to be part of, to be not alone, to be young. The US arts are our guide to inclusion, a how-to. We are shown how to fashion masks of ennui and jaded irony at a young age, where the face is fictile enough to assume the shape of whatever it wears. And then it's stuck there, the weary cynicism that saves us from gooey sentiment and unsophisticated naivete. Sentiment equals naivety on this continent, and so on. So, Infinite Jest, that's one that you could add to your pantheon of lazy literature. And then I just want to mention a couple of books which capture love in long, hot summers, and also just to see if people have been making any comments or adding any suggestions themselves. I have got a couple which I will bring to your attention in a minute. Wait to see you here, Liz Hoggard. I wonder if you've got any favourite lazy literature books that take you to long, hot, lazy beaches maybe, or books that are about being idle and lazing around. Let me know if so. So a couple of love stories which are about long, hot, lazy summers that must be mentioned are Call Me By Your Name by Andrew Ackerman, which is a fantastic novel, very short, and it's about the blossoming love between two young men. One is only 17, I think one is about 24, and I'll just read you a little section of it because it does immediately capture it, and then that's all you need to know. When I think back to that summer, I can never sort the sequence of events. There are a few key scenes. Otherwise, all I remember are the repeat moments, the morning ritual before and after breakfast, Oliver lying on the grass, or by the pool, I sitting at my table, then the swim or the jog, then his grabbing a bicycle and riding to see the translator in town, lunch at the large shaded dining table in the other garden, or lunch indoors, always a guest or two for lunch drudgery. The afternoon hours, splendid and lush with abundant sun and silence. There are other scenes, the postprandial silence, some of us napping, some working, others reading, the whole world basking away in hushed semitones. Heavenly hours when voices from the world beyond our house would filter in so softly that I was sure I had drifted off. Then afternoon tennis, shower and cocktails, waiting for dinner, guests again, dinner, his second trip to the translator, strolling into town and back late at night, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. So that's Call Me By Your Name by Andrew Ackerman, which is a fantastic story of young love, but also a story of idle, delicious summer heady days. And another one which comes to mind on the same theme is First Love by Ivan Turgenev, which is another great summer love story, which I have mentioned previously, so I won't go into great detail, but it is about a young man falling in love with a slightly older girl who's a princess, and him having delightful days of trying to catch her attention and following her around and riding on horses. And it's all very much about being a Russian aristocrat. And it's very delightful as a read, but also actually has some rather major dramas. So it's a fantastic read to take with you on a holiday if you are lucky enough to be going anywhere. And if you're not, you could just lie in a hammock in your back garden or even in your cabin at home, like me, and have a literary vacation instead. Henry David Thoreau must be mentioned when thinking about lazy literature, because he was a total proponent of the idea of not working or of trying to work as little as possible. He began writing nature poetry in the 1840s with poet Ralph Waldo Emerson as a mentor and friend. And in 1845 he began his famous 2-year stay on Walden Pond, in which he wrote his masterwork, Walden. He also became known for his beliefs in transcendentalism and civil disobedience, and he was a dedicated abolitionist. In 1845, Perec built a small home for himself on Walden Pond, which was on a property owned by Emerson, and he spent more than 2 years there seeking a simpler type of life. He flipped the standard routine of the times, experimenting with working as little as possible, rather than engaging in the pattern of 6 days on with 1 day off. He was radical. He sometimes worked as a land surveyor or in the pencil factory that was owned by his dad, and he felt that this new approach helped him to avoid the misery he saw around him. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, Thoreau once wrote, and he was all about avoiding those lives of quiet desperation and trying to lead a life of contemplation and true philosophy and meaning. He says, "I have spent many an hour when I was younger, floating over its surface as the zephyr willed, having paddled my boat to the middle and lying on my back across the seas, in a summer forenoon, dreaming awake until I was aroused by the boat touching the sand, and I arose to see what shore my fate had impelled me to, days when idleness was the most attractive and productive industry. Many a forenoon have I stolen away, preferring to spend thus the most valued part of the day. For I was rich, if not in money, in sunny hours and summer days, and spent them lavishly. Nor do I regret that I did not waste more of them in the workshop or the teacher's desk. Wouldn't we all like to be rich in sunny hours and summer days? I hope that many of you are rich in those things. He says again, my days were not days of the week bearing the stamp of any heathen deity, nor were they minced into hours and fretted by the ticking of a clock. For I lived like the Puri Indians, of whom it is said that, for yesterday, today, and tomorrow, they have only one word, and they express the variety of meaning by pointing backward for yesterday, forward for tomorrow, and overhead for the passing day. This was sheer idleness to my fellow townsmen, no doubt, but if the birds and flowers had tried me by their standard, I should not have been found wanting." So that's Thoreau from Walden. So, does anyone have any last thoughts or comments about lazy literature? I have had quite a few people writing in on Twitter and talking about how Jane Austen, for instance, doesn't count in their view as lazy literature, but reading a Jane Austen novel gives this particular listener the opportunity to feel like they're doing something valid, to give them an excuse and a good reason to read. And that is a fantastic thought. I would say that reading a brilliant novel is the perfect form of idleness, a perfect form of laziness. I would say it's not laziness, but it is a great use of time. And lots of people think that if you are sitting around reading a book, that's being lazy. Au contraire, it's doing great things for your brain and for your mental health. Everyone should spend at least 6 minutes a day reading a novel or some fiction. I'm sure that most of you that I'm talking to, I'm preaching to the converted. But if you tend to be more readers of non-fiction, try reading some fiction, because it is a different kind of resetting your brain when you read fiction as it is to when you read non-fiction. It actually slows down your heart, slows down your breathing. The waves of your brain have been shown to slow down when you are reading fiction in a way that's different to reading non-fiction. Anyway, time is nearly up. Next month in August, I'm going to be talking about great American road trips in literature. I have just returned from one of those great American road trips myself, which I am excited to share with you and to talk about great American road trips in novels. So do tell me if you've got any particular favourite road trips in novels that you would like me to talk about or that you can bring to my attention. Oh yes, one last thing is, some of you might have been following me on my personal Instagram and Facebook pages. I'm doing a hula hoop challenge where every day for the month of July I'm hula hooping for 15 minutes, and I'm just at the end of this session going to start my hula hooping before I leave you. If you would like to donate to my hula hooping challenge page, you can find the link in my bio on Instagram. I'll just adjust my Facebook page so that I don't have to crouch down. Or you can also find it, woo, that was exciting, on my Facebook page. I will be doing this later when I turn off, as I've just managed to break my hula. Fear not, it can be fixed. I just need to pick it back together. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me this evening. It's been lovely having you here with me. And do continue to send in comments, thoughts, questions, and ideas for future bibliotherapy sessions. Have a great night and see you soon. Good night.